So today is our session 3, and this week we are talking about plant breeding and seed saving. And our check-in question to start us off is, tell us something new that you have learned in the last week. And I can start by saying that something new I learned was I went over to the college here in town, Dakota College at Botno, where Josh is interning, and got some plant starts. And I learned from April, the farm manager, that I've been planting my tomatoes in pots that are too small. And so she gave me much bigger pots, and my tomatoes will be happier this year. So tomatoes need more room than I thought. Gretchen, what's something new you've learned? Can be in your internship, can be just life in general.
I don't know if this is within the last week, but I was talking to one of the other interns, and we were replanting things, repotting, and she said she was surprised there weren't worms in the bag, and I was like, what? So apparently worms can get into bags of soil through the holes in them, and sometimes you can end up getting a bag of soil that has worms living in it.
Cool. Hopefully the kind of worms that you want.
Yeah, it was earthworms. It's still in there.
I guess I have a job at a greenhouse as well as this internship, but I've been learning a lot more about composting. And there was an old farmer that was talking about how he uses horse manure in his garden. And one year he put too much of it in and his plants grew like crazy, but they didn't have any fruit on them. So too much nitrogen. But yeah, I guess that's the one thing I can think of right now.
Great. Clara.
Not really farm related or anything, but there's been some actions in Fargo for the conflict in between Israel and Palestine, and so I had dinner with one of the organizers who had lived and taught English in Palestine for like 2 years, and so like he just gave me like the whole history and what it's like there. So
Some really complex history. Devin.
Today, this week in general, or not with Noreen, because Noreen and me aren't starting till next week, actually tomorrow, but over this week at our own little hobby farm, we've been planting a lot of different things, and I've been trying to learn new things along the way, I apparently we haven't planted corn a whole lot, and I apparently planted them way too close, so that would be a good thing to remember for next time.
Great, yeah. Welcome, Josh. Our check-in question today is, what is something new that you've learned in the last week? Can be farm related, can be just life in general.
Farm related, I can give a very good thing I learned about 3 hours ago. I need to leave more nodes for harvesting basil. I over-harvested last week, so I barely got 1 bag when I got 7 last week. Definitely something I learned. I'll show that again.
There you go. Yeah, the plants need time to reproduce. Well, thank you all. So before we dive into the learning portion, I want to go over a few housekeeping details. So the first is about your paperwork. So part of your paperwork was this I-9 form. And one thing is to make sure that you sign it. I think we had one that wasn't signed. But the other part is that it's the forms of ID you submit. You actually either need to submit something from list A, or if you don't have list A, something from B and C. So I may have misled you, and for that I apologize. Your driver's license is not on list A. Passport is. So if you have a passport, if you could submit that, that will cover you. If you do not have a passport, you need to submit 2 forms of identification, and one of them has to have a photo on it, I believe. So a driver's license or ID card. Or if you don't have a driver's license, like a school ID card, a driver's license or permit, and a second document that establishes employment authorization, such as your social security card, birth certificate, certificate of report of birth, citizen ID card, Native American tribal documents, identification card for use of resident citizen, not sure what that is. Those need to be photographed and mailed to farms as soon as you can. If you already mailed in your driver's license, you can just submit the photograph of the second document. Or if you have a passport, that's even better, because then you just have to send the one. I also wanted to discuss the time cards. I have submitted time cards from, I think, most all of you. Just a reminder that pay period ended on May 29th. So if you worked any hours that you didn't submit, make sure you send those to me as soon as possible, because Jennifer will be processing payroll on Wednesday. However, if she does not yet have your ACH form or W-4, she may not be able to process your payroll until she gets those. So specifically, I'm still waiting for Devin for your paperwork, and the others aren't here right now. So if you have any questions about that, let me know and I'm happy to help you out. And then a quick reminder that to make sure you include your intern class as hours worked. Most of you have, I think. I always double check because I don't want to end up paying some of you for class and others not. Yeah, any questions about the time cards?
Not about the time cards, but for the weekly reports. I logged in on Sunday to do it, and again, like there wasn't one available to do it. So then I had to wait until after the deadline on Monday, and then it popped up like, oh, you have one overdue. I was able to go back. I don't know if that I was missing something on my end, or I mean, I have it in. It goes only a couple hours after Monday at noon, but
I will ask about that. I'm not sure.
it says something like a week is not specified, something along those lines.
That sounds kind of like a technical.
That's what I thought. Yeah, so I thought I'd let someone know.
Thank you. I will look into that. But otherwise, I want to say kudos to all of you for getting your experience reports in. They're all in here. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Did you happen to ask about the breaks to get an answer on that? If we subtract them from hours?
So I need to get final confirmation from my HR consultant, but I can tell you that North Dakota labor law and federal labor law says that if you are working over 5 or more hours in a day, you get a meal break, but that's not necessarily, that's a break of like 30 minutes or more, but it's not necessarily paid, like just rest breaks. If they're less than 15-20 minutes, you can count that as time worked. You know, take breaks when you're tired. Don't overwork yourself, but also don't like abuse the rule either. So okay, so class time. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you here. Did all of you, I had 5 responses to the poll about class time. Were those 5 responses from the 5 of you that are here? Did any of you here not take the poll?
I didn't because it wouldn't load on my email.
I'm not sure what this, did I miss the poll?
I'm going to put it in the chat right now so that the 2 of you might take it right now. But I gotta. So it was in your email that you received. I sent you one shortly after class last week, and then you got another one yesterday. Okay, so the link to the poll is in the chat, and the question is, what time are you most available for class? And your options, you have several options on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. From the responses I've gotten so far, most people are available, I believe it was Monday from like 10 to 11.
Noon
And
to 1 and 2 to 3.
oh, noon to 1 and 2 to 3. Thank you.
Mine, I think it must be something with my phone, but it's still not loading, so I can't take the poll, but anything works for me. I can make it all work.
Okay, great. And how about you, Devin? Do noon to 1 or 2 to 3 on Mondays work for you? Oh, you're still muted.
Most of this works for me. I'm not sure about Wednesdays because I think that's when I'm going to be at a farm, and I'm not sure how it's going to work. But most of the Mondays work. Mondays and Tuesdays work for me.
Okay. Well, hearing that, that's 7 responses out of 10. I think we'll go with Mondays. Let's do Monday afternoons from 2 to 3, just because it's going to be summer, it's going to get hot, and you're going to want to take a break in the shade at the hottest part of the day anyway. And intern class would be a great way to do that. So I think going forward, we'll do Mondays 2 to 3. And I will confirm that with an email later on. Okay, so you had homework from last week. Last week we talked about local food systems. So I'd like to start by reviewing that. So first, I would love to hear some of the responses that you got from your host farmers to the question about how are your host farmers engaged in local food systems? I know, Clara, you had a great response in your report.
My host farmers are really focused on building networks of producers in the area and like thinking about ways to better support producers. In Fargo, there's like a lot of focus on like the farmers markets and like spreading the word about local foods and like awareness like to consumers. But there, from their perspective, there isn't really a lot of support and engagement with the actual producers, which seems a little bit backwards. So they've done certain things over the year, like they're trying to like advocate and lobby on like policy levels. Right now, they started another co-op that is more focused on like producers working together and like some like professional development and stuff too, and like helping with like business mentorship.
Great, great. Gretchen, did Carol have some insights about local food systems?
So Stable Days does the farmers market here, so they are involved with produce mainly through that, and they also do some honey and apple juice. And I don't know if they actually sell those at the farmers market or if they do that more on like a local small scale basis. And then they're also getting into butchering meat chickens. So hoping to get that set up so that they can get certified and be involved with local businesses and like sell chickens to businesses and be involved in food system in a little bit different way that way.
Has she talked with you at all about the farmers market trolley and efforts to serve low-income populations in Grand Forks?
No, we didn't talk about that.
Okay. Ask her about that. I think that would be, I know that a few years ago they got a grant to purchase a retired trolley from, I think, like San Francisco, and turned it into a mobile farmers market so that the farmers market could be, so that the trolley could take the farmers market to low income neighborhoods in Grand Forks where people have had lower access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And I think she has talked about other like workshops for low income people at the farm, like growing and cooking with produce. But yeah, see if she'll talk more about that.
Yeah, it's around a lot, so I didn't actually get to meet with her this week and talk about that. This is just kind of what I know that they do.
Great. You also got a food literacy quiz, and I'm just gonna go through some of the results for that, see if you learned anything new from that quiz. So did any of you take the quiz? Okay. So I won't spend a lot of time on it because we have other things to cover, but I bet you knew which were the tomato seeds. What about this question about which is least disruptive to a natural ecosystem? Did that answer surprise you at all? In this case, it was native pests and weeds being part of a natural ecosystem to begin with were less disruptive than some other things. Okay, the question about how much water is required to produce a serving of hamburger versus a serving of lettuce, that one was a surprise to me. I actually guessed wrong.
So did I.
I ended up guessing right. I just I knew it was a lot of water, but I didn't think it was the largest. So I went with the second largest.
Mm-hmm. What about what accounts for the largest portion of a given food item's carbon footprint? Did that one surprise anyone?
That one shocked me. I was certain it would have been transportation because of how far it has to go constantly.
Yeah.
That was my answer to transportation, and that surprised me.
So they said it's actually production and processing, which make up 82% of emissions. So I'm thinking about like, there's a big canola processing plant on Highway 52 near Velva, North Dakota. There's a big sunflower oil processing plant near Enderlin. The sugar plant on I-29. All of those are examples of processing, and I suppose big plants like that would produce quite a bit of emissions. This question about which represents the largest portion of the food supply, trying to get us to think about food waste.
I actually got this one right, but only because I did a whole thing on global hunger a few years before. So I got a little bit of this memorized.
Great.
I knew that from classes when I was in high school. It's just, it came up way too often. It's like, we throw away so much food. We could feed a bunch of African countries with all the food we throw away.
Great. And one last one, the PLU codes. Do you ever look at the PLU codes when you're shopping? At the grocery store?
This one was very sad. I didn't see that it was per serving. That was very mean.
Oh, you're looking at
Yes.
the per serving, the milligrams of sodium.
Yeah, that was evil.
Mm-hmm.
But it always teaches you one very valuable lesson. Slow the F down.
Sure. So yeah, so I'm glad you guys took that quiz. And we have a farmer here to talk to us, but before he does, I want to go through some other slides that I've prepared for you just to give you some background to what he's going to talk about. So Glen Philbrick is here to talk about his plant breeding and seed saving work. But first, we have a quick presentation on some terms that I want you to be sure that you're all familiar with. And if you did the pre-work reading, you will have seen these terms already. So the first one, I want to be sure you know what selective breeding means. Anybody want to offer a definition for selective breeding? You can, of course, read it off the screen too. Josh?
Sure, I was about to unmute. I'll just go with my own personal definition rather than reading what's on there because I think we all have eyes and can read it.
Yep.
To me, selective breeding is taking the best offspring of the previous generation, breeding them together to get an even greater yield or color for the next generation. It's how we got modern corn, as you can see in the picture. And you want to have, if you want a disease-resistant variety, you breed selectively with a specific kind of plant or with a specific breed that is immune to a certain disease to give it that disease immunity.
Yep. And so the image shows teosinte, I might have mispronounced that, on the left, which is what is the predecessor to modern corn. And through hundreds and thousands of years of selective breeding, we've produced what is the current, what is modern corn.
I did also notice, like, when he said that, he said best. That is a little bit of subjective. Like, is it? It's probably best for human consumption, is what he was meaning. Like for the actual plant, it might not be best for its survival.
That's a good point. We select for qualities that we want, and what we want varies depending on who's doing the selective breeding. And sometimes plants get bred for better storage or higher yields, things that are beneficial to us. So I want to be sure that you understand the difference between selective breeding and genetic engineering, because a lot of times people confuse the two or assume that they're the same thing, and they're not. So anybody want to say what genetic engineering is?
Basically, genetic engineering is taking the genes of, in this case, a wild plant and grafting it onto or combining it with your crop. For example, let's say tomatoes. I know we had a few years ago a very wild or very problematic disease that we were dealing with. And with genetic engineering, we would be able to take a wild relative that was completely immune to this new disease and just graft them straight onto the new plant and get rid of the old genes.
I think you might be talking about something a little different. So in this case, genetic engineering is actually in a lab adding new genetic material into the genes. So you might be talking about grafting or hybridization or selective, maybe some selective breeding. So I just want to be sure everybody understands that when we're talking about genetic engineering or genetic modification, they're actually changing, like in this case, a corn picture, they're taking a gene from a bacteria and they're splicing it into the genetics of the corn to make BT GMO corn. And those genetic changes are passed down then through the seed of the plant. Another way that plants change is hybridization. Glenn, do you want to talk about what hybridization is?
This is done through crossing, so this wouldn't be genetic engineering. I don't do this yet. I've had to raise some variety trials, and so I like the chart they got there with the Y, big Y, little y, essentially. So essentially you get one generation that you get your desired trait, and then every generation after that, it starts losing it. You may get it, but you may not. But
so you can't necessarily use the seed from a hybrid.
Not necessarily, no.
It may not be stable.
You may not get the desired trait you're looking for.
Okay, we got 2 more terms and a summary chart, and then we'll take it over to you, Glenn. So open-pollinated seed, that is basically just like normal seed, you could say. It's seed that's pollinated not by humans, but, well, it can be by humans, but by natural mechanisms such as insects, bird, winds, humans, or other natural mechanisms. So it's not necessarily hybridized, it's not genetically modified, and it results in greater genetic diversity. Okay, so that's open pollinated. And then we have heirloom varieties. So heirloom varieties must be open pollinated, but not all open pollinated plants are heirlooms. So heirloom simply means that these are varieties that we have passed down from generation to generation, kept the lines pure, haven't allowed them to cross so that they stay what they are. You often see heirloom tomatoes at farmers markets. And people focus on heirloom varieties because they're wanting to preserve genetic lines and traits. And then finally, we have a summary table, which compares all of these, open pollinated, heirloom, hybrids, genetically modified. Any questions before we move on to Glen?
Why can you not save the seeds of GMO products?
Great question. So you're going to see some of that in the homework readings, but most times genetically modified seeds are patented by the company that produced them. And so you'll get in trouble for patent violations if you save them. Yeah, you can. I mean, I think they will grow, but there's property and patent issues there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to turn the stage over to Glen Philbrick. He is a farmer from Turtle Lake, North Dakota, and he has been involved, I think you've been involved in some, well, at least variety trials with plant breeding, and you are producing organic vegetable seed for sale to seed companies, right?
Correct.
Yes, so the stage is yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Glen. I am a certified organic farmer involved in specialty crop production. In addition, I raise cattle. I've been doing gardening my whole life. And I got into variety trials beginning in 2014 and contract seed production beginning in 2018. I have done vegetable production for sale earlier on, but it's more lucrative to do seed production because I send it all out of state. The market wasn't in my area for large scale vegetable production. And I got my certification in 2016. So recent soil tests show I do not need to add anything to my soil. There's been manure applied, cover crops, crop rotation. This has made a big difference in having a healthy soil. So when I dig and plant and I find earthworms, that's a good sign. I do some no-till farming with the use of mulch. So this isn't really putting a drill into soil, it's spreading the hay or putting the hay that I grow in between the rows. I'm still planting a few things yet. I got transplants to do. This year I have about 20 different crops. So they range from peppers are part of our variety trial. There's hot peppers for seed, popcorn, different flowers. Some are ornamental. I remember everything, 3 kinds of squash, cucumbers, carrots. Some are 2-year deals, carrots or beets or chard has to come out of the ground in the fall. We put in the cellar over winter, then back in the ground again, then it'll produce seed. And so I do this because this is something I love to do. I've always had my hands and fingers in the dirt, growing something and enjoying the fruits of my labor. So seed production is something I can do on smaller acreage to make that fruition come true. I'm also a business instructor at Standing Rock. You may have heard of Standing Rock at Hiddendale College. I'm off for the summer. So challenges I have and what I do, as we all know, it's dry. So I do have to do some irrigation, some from a well, some from a water source pond. Weeds are always a challenge. Mulch helps a lot. Crop rotation helps a lot. Alfalfa is your organic Roundup. You put that in for a few years, it tends to cheat everything out. I'm also involved in research, whether it be variety trial or weed studies, and a few things, my own projects. I'm trying to think what else I can tell you. I'm giving you the short version. I didn't want to create a whole slideshow and kill you with PowerPoint, but
so we're learning about seed saving and why it matters.
I'll address that. Why it matters is when they did lab tests on vegetables or crops, the nutrient density is important. And so when things have been grown for simply mass production, so we get a lot of tomatoes from a plant or iceberg lettuce, well, the taste isn't there with iceberg, and the nutrients isn't like it's in some heirloom varieties or open pollinated. And so maybe with these heirloom varieties or open pollinated, you don't get the production you would with, say, iceberg lettuce, but the flavor and nutrients are there. So that's why it matters. Another reason is that the patenting of seed is a topic for some people. With GMOs, then I have to keep buying it every year, where before I could keep saving it. And our ancestors saved their seeds for thousands of years. When I listen to Clay Jenkinson as Thomas Jefferson on NPR, Thomas Jefferson says, or Clay Jenkinson says they'd be rolling in their graves because all of the founding fathers did that. This reduces your expenses when you can use your own seed. As a contract producer, I don't buy seed. They provide it to me. So it's one less expense. I don't buy fertilizer. I don't need it because I take care of my soil. So my inputs are far less. My major input is, well, especially crops, labor is a little more intensive. Your weed control is often your crop rotation or manual. I mean, I hoed a half acre of corn last year, in addition to row cultivating it. So I put in my time with that. I didn't realize the importance of seed saving as a child, but now I understand, okay, here's why grandma would do it. I always witnessed my grandma doing it. And you can see why they saved the varieties they did. And when you look at heirloom varieties, let's say Southern Exposure Seed Exchange has, or Fedco or Johnny Seeds, they're heirloom for a reason, and they're important because the taste is there, the vigor is there. Some of it may be regional. I'm aware of with some crops, 10 farmers grow them and 2 say, this is the worst lettuce I've grown, but it may be environmental too. So some of it is region specific. For example, you can't get carrot seed in Southeast US. Queen Anne's lace is very prevalent. Plus it needs to get so cold for so long for those carrots to produce seed. So here I am up in the frigid north and I can make that happen. Same with chard or beets as well. So I look at it from more than one perspective. One is cultural, one is nutritious, and one is just economical. You save your own seed. I produced rye 2 years. I don't ever have to produce it again, and rye is a cover crop I use. Yeah, if you got to buy a bunch of seed to put in whatever, it's really expensive. It hurts your bottom line. So that's, besides being a seed producer, if I wasn't a seed producer, seed would be another expense I'd have to look at. It's like, well, why am I spending a lot of money on something when it doesn't need to be a reoccurring cost every year? Fair question.
Who do you produce the seeds for?
7 different companies, Johnny Seeds, Fedco, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, AP Whaley, Row 7. I think if we're forgetting here, I list of my because I added a few this year. Let me think here. No, I didn't do high mowing this year. I produced for high mowing last year. And let's see, who am I forgetting? I think I'm forgetting one. I'm trying to remember who I'm forgetting. Nature and Nurture. That's what I'm forgetting.
Okay. And Row 7 is Dan Barber's company, right?
I think they're associated. No, I can't remember where the ownership falls in, but there's an association there.
So what questions do you all have for Glenn about? Yeah, Gretchen.
Okay, so on one of the slides before, there was a thing about like a little thing about the heirloom varieties, that you can't have them pollinated with a different variety or with a non-heirloom. Did I read that wrong?
So what with varieties, to keep their purity, some things cross and some things don't. And so something I have to work on with many things I grow is isolation. For example, with squash, you have their cucurbit is the Latin term in front, and then they just put a C dot to abbreviate that, and you have C. pepo, C. machata, and C. maxima. So I can grow all 3 at 1 of each and not worry about crossing. Lettuce, for example, needs 25 feet of isolation. Spinach needs at least a half a mile.
Okay.
So it depends on what it is. So there's some things I can't grow because of isolation. Some things I can grow. So generally, some things can go pretty close and some things can't.
So if it
Do you know what the range is on peas?
oh, go ahead.
Pardon?
Do you know what the range is on peas?
I do have a list. I can tell you fairly quickly. Let's see here. Isolation. There we go. One of the longest things is, I think, let's see, peas. 150 feet
Okay.
on peas.
Okay. So if you plant heirloom peas within 150 feet of another variety, you cannot collect the seeds. Is that?
You could, but there's a chance it might cross-pollinate unless you have some kind of barrier. So that's the risk you run, is if they're that close, they could cross-pollinate, and now whatever trait you had in this one variety, you might lose it, or it might mix and match and be a little bit different. That's a risk.
So they'll produce probably possibly edible peas that are perfectly fine for your own use, but you couldn't market them as that variety because the
Exactly.
genetic purity would have been lost.
Yep. For example, with corn, we can have tassel bags and cob bags, and I've worked with them before. So if I cover the cob, then no pollen can get in there, and when your corn is self-pollinating, except for crossing the wind, so when the corn is ready to pollinate, you take all the bags off and start shaking. You'll just take a broom and brush along the corn. Then you pollinated your own corn, and you've kept other things out of there. Popcorn can only cross-pollinate with other popcorn, but sweet corn or whatever corn out there cannot pollinate popcorn. So there's ways around, to stop cross-pollination.
Devin, did you have a question?
I had a few. So if like certain, I noticed one year we were trying to grow 2 different types of corn, and then we tried to save the seeds, and it happened to blow up the hill and must have cross-pollinated somewhere. So, and we ended up with some kind of hybrid-looking corn. And I'm just wondering, like, it does like, if the wind does blow it, is there different areas where it's more likely to blow? Like, do you have problems with hills or with wind patterns that might mess up the type of plants you have and make hybrids?
So I mean, with where I'm at, the prevailing wind is northwest, but that doesn't mean the wind couldn't come from the southeast and cross-pollinate. So I make sure that the isolation is there. And then plan B would be your cob and tassel bags. Because that's something I had to watch last year. And like this year, I have no neighbors growing corn. So yay, I'm okay for that. So hills could affect it because they could, channel the wind one way. Basically, having the isolation distance is best. And some say 660 feet, 2 miles is probably best with corn.
And another question is, do you have problems with natural pollinators?
I don't actually. I had some squash that didn't. They produce poor quality seed. And when I talked to another grower, we identified it as a pollination issue. So what I do is I have the bee guy put hives right in my field, and that did help.
So that scares off natural pollinators, or does that just introduce a different type of pollinator that pollinates more?
I guess you have more pollinators of one variety. There's still some natural ones around, but it was kind of a guarantee that I would have enough pollinators, plus I had water there for them as well. Yeah, when I think of the natural ones, there's not as many as I would like to see around. So hence I have the Aperi drop off a few hives, and he's happy to do it.
Do the bees or the pollinators ever carry pollen from other plants and cross-pollinate? Like you can't control how far they travel.
Yeah, there's some varieties they worry about that, some they don't. So generally it's in the specific. I think Gretchen has a question.
I missed this, but how much land are you working with?
So I have, besides an entire quarter section pasture certified, I got some 40 acres of field certified, a good chunk of it alfalfa. So I'm mainly working off of about 17 acres for production, which has to be rotated. 12 of it's in transition because an applicator didn't read a map and lived in my field last year. So this year I got basically 5 I'm primarily working with. And part of it I put back into rotation, into alfalfa for my weed control. So it's, if I had my 13-acre field available, I'd be a lot better off this year because I had to give up some, I couldn't get some contracts because of that. So it is small acreage. For example, I know of a farm in Oregon, I think they're under 15 acres. They do over 200 grand of sales in a year. That's all contract. And that's all a lot of handwork. That's not running out there with the combine. It's a lot of belt thresher or stationary to combine. It's not your typical go out and swath it or straight cut it. So to do this, you got to love to work literally have your nose in the dirt, have your fingers in the dirt, be willing to touch plants. Some plants are unfriendly to touch, like safflower. You have to wear welding gloves, literally. I bought welding gloves for this. It's like 100 sewing needles on every plant. Waiting to get you. But, depends on what it is.
Stephanie mentioned earlier that heirloom varieties can get kind of old. What do you have, like really old varieties that you have had passed down onto you, or?
I know there's some of my grandma's stuff in a bucket somewhere. So like Norfolk is one of the, and Poke Joe is like an old variety. It's spinach and cilantro. I'm not sure how far they go back, but given what the companies I'm dealing with, they go back a long ways because they're East Coast, where they've had a few hundred years ahead of us. I'm not sure on the date, but in their catalog, they'll market heirlooms. That tells me there's at least a century of history there.
Any other questions for Glenn? Yeah.
With strains that are that old, like do you run into problems like how we see in dogs, like purebred dogs tend to have more health issues or so on? Does that happen with heirloom plants?
I guess the only places where I've had some health issues where I've had some tomatoes and I wasn't sure if it was a bacteria due to calcium or bacteria due to the variety. Because at the same time, I had other varieties where this didn't happen. So I didn't have an answer for that. Or other things, the squash or things like that, I didn't run into that. You have to determine if our season is long enough for some things. I did a gourd and our season wasn't long enough for the seed to mature. So I produced hollow seed essentially.
Didn't you say though that heirloom varieties sometimes don't produce as prolifically as
Some do not. Yep.
strains?
For example, Brandywine tomato, it'll take a lot more plants to get a pound of seed than some other varieties. And generally the seed company knows, like, okay, generally it takes X number of plants to get this number many pounds. So there's a lot of variation in that.
I guess I have one question, was that, so you're marketing certified organic seed, right?
Correct.
So if a producer is selling certified organic produce, like a farmer's market grower, is one of the requirements that they use certified organic seed?
Yes. There is an exception if you under no circumstances can you use GMO. You can use non-certified organic seed if you're looking for variety specific and you can't get it anyplace else. But GMO is off the table.
And I will make sure to add Glenn's email to your homework table so that you can easily find where to contact him. Part of your homework includes some other local farmers that are growing organic seed. So make sure you read about Teresa and Dan Podol from Prairie Road Organic Seed. And definitely listen to this podcast from North Circle Seeds. North Circle Seeds is in Minnesota. And if last year we had Zach come and speak to the interns, I'm not sure if we'll have time this year, but if possible, we'll see, because he's a great speaker as well. But he does do a podcast about seed saving and different varieties, so I'd encourage you to listen to that. He also has a seed saving guide for you. I've uploaded your slides, and this is more information about selective breeding and a quiz about the difference between selective breeding and genetic engineering. And then the rest of this is more information and reading. The Open Source Seed Initiative is a great place to learn about heirloom seeds and keeping seed genetics alive. This article about the seed emergency from Al Jazeera provides a global perspective about why people are trying to keep biodiversity alive and maintain genetic lines. And then make sure you check out the resources page, because there's additional information about seeds, such as the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, where they're trying to preserve as many different varieties as possible, way up north past the Arctic Circle, and a bunch of other articles. So don't necessarily get overwhelmed. I know that looks like a lot. The resources are just bonus reading. They're not required. And if you don't get through all of this homework, that's fine. I do want you to ask your host farmer where they source their seeds and how they decide what kind of seeds to plant. And do the quiz about selective breeding and genetic engineering, and listen to the podcast. Those are the 3 core parts of the homework.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah.
So a really great resource and where I get my seeds is Baker's Creek. It's called bitterseeds.com. They're all open pollinated heirloom seeds, but if you go to each of the seeds, they all have a story. And so it's kind of just fun to like see the story behind it and how far it goes.
And they have a beautiful catalog.
Yes, very informational one.
I will add that to the resource table. I don't know why I forgot about Baker Creek. Thank you. That is a really great one. So that is your homework. We always end with a reflection question. I had a really hard time coming up with a question that would distill all the different things we talked about today. So I would just invite you to share any takeaways you have from today's class, something that is going to stick with you or something new you learned.
That video in our homework was beautiful, and it made me cry about the sun and the seed and how much it, like, just that whole thing meant for you. And so that's kind of my takeaway, is like every seed really does have a story, and it's more than a seed.
Absolutely. And if you haven't watched the video about Steve Zwinger in your pre-work yet, definitely, it makes me cry too every time.
Is it possible to get the pre-work with more time ahead? The past few times it's been like late Monday evening, and I haven't been able, and I work Tuesday morning, so like, and so it's like I don't have time to do the pre-work beforehand, but like I definitely would if I had more than 12 hours.
Yeah, I'm working on that. It's basically that we usually have a program manager, and I'm in the process of hiring the program manager, so I'm doing like 2 people's jobs, and it always gets, but I hear you. Yeah. We'll see if we can get it done tomorrow this week so that you have more time.
For sure, not a critique. I just want to be prepared for class.
Absolutely, I understand. Any other takeaways?
I'm definitely going to look more into patenting seeds. I know that's really frustrating that like something that nature makes is being turned into property. I really don't like that.
For sure.
Well, at the end of the day, we're humans. We like to stomp on the world. We do whatever we want because the world doesn't fight back hard enough sometimes.
I thought the just like different ways that you can combine seeds and like the different genetic modification or hybridization and kind of like the pros and cons of each of those is very interesting. It's something I just didn't know really anything about.
For sure. And I'll put all of these comments in your harvest document for takeaway. Okay, well, thanks a bunch, you all. Great class. Next week, we're going to hear from April Mobby and GK at DCB, and we're going to learn about season extension and indoor production. So have a great week. Let me know if you have any questions, and you'll hear from me tomorrow with the recording and hopefully pre-work.